Hello, Yes But Why listeners. This is your host, Amy Jordan. Welcome to episode 213 with comedy writer and producer Meghan R. Ross. But first, a bit about our sponsor. This episode of Yes But Why podcast is sponsored by Audible. You can get your free audiobook download and your 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/yesbutwhy. We didn't talk about it on the podcast, but Meghan's bio says she wrote tweets one time for Mel Brooks. So let's see what comes up when you put Mel Brooks in the search bar on Audible. Okay, looks like some awesome biographies and interviews. Good stuff, as usual. Audible is available for your iPhone, Android, or Kindle. Download your free audiobook today at audibletrial.com/yesbutwhy. In this week's episode of Yes But Why, I had a great time talking to Meghan R. Ross. A kindred spirit in many ways, Meghan and I both started our comedy careers in New York City. We talk about networking, marketing, and sketch comedy. Meghan was really fun to talk to, and it was cool to hear how she hosts, writes, and produces her talk show that time of the month. I now present to you Yes But Why, episode 213. Meghan R. Ross is the comedy version of a mullet. And I swear, she says it in the episode, not me. I'm Amy Jordan, and this is Yes But Why podcast. Yeah.
After I had come back from studying abroad, I studied abroad in London, and I got to intern. I had a cool internship there at Universal Pictures, but it was in marketing, and it was fun. But I also was like, my supervisor was didn't really know what to do with me, so I had to like seek out work from other supervisors. That was my first foray into like entertainment industry stuff, but it was still marketing.
Universal Studios,
yeah, and
like
Universal
the UK
Pictures
version or whatever.
Yeah, it was basically their international office, so they handled distribution of like all the films across like outside the U.S., outside North America, I guess. Wow. And so, yeah, it was fun and cool. But then, like, I was a freaking comedy nerd. I watched like the Thursday night comedy lineup, like Community, Office, Parks and Rec, like other things I can name drop that won't make my experience unique to anyone else. Like all those like things that like every person who wanted to like take classes at UCB was watching at that age and time. So I wanted to work for NBC so badly. So this internship was my like first step. And then I applied. I like met a woman at like this. It's so funny. It was like a Harvard Woman in Business networking event. I did not go to Harvard. I went to Boston University. I don't know why I was there, but I basically was like trying to network with like anyone from NBC. Met her there. She was like a recruiter and like stayed in touch. When I came home, I was like, oh, I'd love to intern. Like, here's my background. And I went on a couple interviews with Bravo. And this is like right at the peak of Bravo starting like Real Housewives and like right in like, this is like 2010, I think, or 2010. Yes. And so it would have been, I was like, yeah, this would be so cool, but maybe a little corny, but like I want this, even though I probably wouldn't fit in with the woman here. And I didn't get it, and I was heartbroken. And I always thought it was because I forgot to send a thank you email. But then I got pulled in like last minute, a couple of weeks before like the summer internship started off, with another internship in the Bravo offices, but with Television Without Pity. And I don't know if you listeners will remember Television Without Pity, but they had a cult following. They basically formed I'm going to get the origin story wrong. I haven't like remembered this in a while, but it was formed by, I believe, two women, and it grew from there. But basically they would recap shows. Like, I think one of the first shows they'd recap was like Dawson's Creek, and like just old shows that people love to hate watch a little bit, and love watch. But they just grew a cult following from being like known for these snarky TV recaps. And in the evolution of TV Without Pity, Bravo bought them out, so they were like in the NBC building. And so it was funny because I was kind of at like the tail end of the TV Without Pity legacy. Like I wasn't in there with like the beginnings, like how like a bunch of TV nerds would remember them fondly. I was in what they'd probably called like the sellout phase of TV Without Pity, but it was still cool. But so I got lucky too, because, well, one, I knew that I was in the right place when I was allowed to call True Blood. True Blood was really big during that 2010 period, and we were talking about it, and I'm like, yeah, it just seems like vampire porn to me. And like my would-be supervisor being very cool with me saying vampire porn in an interview made me realize, like, oh, like these people get me and my humor, and they won't like be like judgmental and stiffy like some corporate internships. So I was very lucky, and I got the internship position. And I learned how to, so TV Without Pity's, tagline is like it's like something with snark. Oh, I can't remember the tagline. I want to type it up, but I don't want to add noise to this interview. Anyway, so it's basically like, you know, writing TV recaps with like snark. And that word sticks out to me, but like I was learning how to write comedically, in a comedic tone, even if it was covering the news. One of my tasks was to search the internet, search like Vulture, all of the the industry rags or whatever, like the websites like Deadline, Variety, all of those publications that cover TV news, and I would write recaps of, like, you know, who's getting a cameo on this Sex and the City episode, and this, you know, like, so actually that was not during Sex and the City. I think it was like probably Sex and the City the movie period. But anyway, I got to learn about like everything going on in the TV world, and then try to find a way to like make it like write the news in a funny way. Sometimes I got to like make fun of the news, or like, you know, actresses and actors and all these people who made so much money. And and then I finally got to write reviews myself, and those were sort of like the meat and potatoes of TV Without Pity, because people like follow those recaps and show reviews, and would look to TV Without Pity to tell them like if this show sucks or not. And I love that internship. Like, that was really the first time I got to hone my comedy writing, even before I took sketch writing classes. And even though most of my friends didn't know what TV Without Pity was at the time, it validated me when I went to a 30 Rock writers panel sometime around that period, like maybe it was 2012. And Tina Fey, someone asked her like if she read reviews or read like anything up on like 30 Rock, you know, TV critic stuff. And she said that she used to love or read religiously TV Without Pity. And I was like, hell yeah. Like, she knows of the name of the place I interned at. And that was a little TV. So dumb. It's like, she does not know my name. I did ask her.
Are you kidding me? Like, I've been like, I did an internship at this place one time, and turns out this famous person went there like one time to see a film. It's crazy. Like, it's not. Yeah. I've taken so much less. So you're allowed to say, Tina Fey said she liked reading the things that you and your coworkers were writing. That's pretty solid, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I firmly believe that Tina Fey had read my Jersey Shore review. And no, she probably did not. But yeah, it was.
Well, did you write the 30 Rock stuff? Because she definitely read that.
No, I did not. No, I was not. I was an intern, so I got the scraps. Not really the scraps, but I did get to review Portlandia after begging to, right when it came out. And conveniently they swapped the episode 1 and 2. So I reviewed episode 2 technically, and someone commented and got mad about it because they're like, this isn't even what aired. And I spoiled episode 2 for them. I'm like, it's a freaking sketch show. There's no spoilers.
So you mentioned a couple of times that, what got you into these kinds of internships was marketing. Sounds like you were in school for marketing, or at least something marketing adjacent, because all of the internships that you've discussed having were in marketing. Was that what you originally expected to be doing? That's what you went to school for?
Yeah, so I went to Boston University in the business school. But I realized halfway through that I wanted to pursue something in the entertainment industry. I thought that I would have to just be a freaking suit for a TV network. I thought that was my destiny because I was just a nerd and a good student, and I was in the business school, even though I wasn't happy with my major. So I just figured I'm not a creative person. I've always been just a studious person. I didn't ever think of myself as an artist or a writer or anything like that. So I was on that path, and that was my major. But at the same time, I was trying to have these internships be in the entertainment industry and in TV and film. And so the TV Without Pity internship was, I think it was the title was online content intern. So it was my first non-marketing role. Unfortunately, that would be my last non-marketing role for several years, because I my next steps essentially were going into advertising, not really for what I wanted to be doing, but just because that was the only job I had out of college. I had a business major, and I was trying to translate that into something creative, and I've been trying to do that for the last decade. So yeah, I was really on this path. I bought a GMAT book. I thought I would pursue my MBA. I'm glad I did not spend the money on that, because I would probably be just as broke now, if not more broke.
Yeah, and there's lots of people with business degrees out there that still don't know how to run businesses, and lots of people who are running businesses that have never even stepped foot into a business school. So I think you're probably fine with the information that you've gotten. Also, the sheer fact that you were out there getting internships and learning different things from different, kinds of people, that means that you're going to be sort of going further than a person who's just what are you going to hand me? I'll take it, right? You were looking for adventure. You were looking for, different people to inspire you. And that's a smart sort of way to move forward. Sometimes, I know that sometimes I think I know what I'm doing. I think I have, this is what my next path is, or this is what I need to do. But, sometimes I'm let's see what the world has in store for me around, right? So you applying for those internships, then it sounds like it just sort of led you down the right path towards the right kind of people. Though I do love the fact that you wanted to be a network person. Maybe you should still be a network person. I've actually thought about it. I was how do you become a network executive? I feel at this point I'm in my 40s. I'm probably past whatever I'd have to do to get there. But at the same time, I'm yeah, I could do that. I could talk to people and decide what goes on and make hard decisions about money. Sure, all right.
You just have to be tired and angry all the time. I feel I honestly, because I
got it.
Yeah, I worked at a couple networks in on the business side, and I would see the higher ups, and they were just, I was just how did they get there? But they seem so angry and tired. Like it's just like they're calling the shots, and everything's always like bad. Like it's all these like bad decision making, and like shows not doing well. So, you know, you're like, oh, do I want to be in those shoes? I don't know. I also have this like separate dream that I want to be like the unproblematic Lorne Michaels. Like, I just want to take his job and his power. Like, I think I'm never going to get hired by SNL, but so like, I'll just put this out there, but like, I think he's a bad dude who's had power for a long time. And I want to like come in and, you know, not be SNL, but like some sort of like dynasty that I take over and make it be like the good version. It's like, oh yeah, like we're not going to have like shitty behavior towards women throughout like certain seasons and it be awful. And I don't know, I'm sure there's people who thrive, but I've just heard from some people who have worked there that and I've also just heard over the years, like people in the comedy scene, it's just, there are so many institutions in comedy that hold so much power, and those suits at the top are usually like the ones that are ruining it for all the people who like love doing it. I think there's a lot of examples. I'll say, you know, theaters that I got training in and stuff. Then we were watching them sort of collapse, and there's some good people involved in those places, but there's usually, like you said, it's like there's some people who just are running businesses who don't know how to run businesses.
Like most
and so
people, let's be honest.
Yeah. And
I love the idea of Lorne Michaels. Like, I always wanted to be Lorne Michaels myself, but you know, you're right that it's kind of like an institution that needs to be broken. Like, there doesn't need to be, when he gets too old to run Saturday Night Live or when he decides to retire, it's not that you or somebody else should take over Saturday Night Live, but rather that there should be a new, different, late night sketch show. And if the need for that is at all, the next time someone says to you, I don't know if that's really what we need, I'll be like, the only television show that stayed on television during this is SNL. The only television show that maintainedly gave you content for you to enjoy that was brand new was them. Everybody else went home, and they were like, the tech guys are like, I can figure out Zoom for 45 people. Yeah, I got it. It's fine. I do it every week with my D&D group, right? So they're like, yeah, let's do this. And then they figured it out. Like, I've seen my fair share very recently of terrible Zoom improv or terrible Zoom sketch shows, right? But they're not doing bad, right? So all I'm saying is the talent is out there to create stuff, and the need for sketch comedy is out there in the world. So, you know, we just need to find a new scenario that can take it over. And you're right, make it more, you know, woke and diverse and everything like that. Get the voices out there and the situations out there that are actually the problem. It's like, we don't all have the same problems as the Kardashians. We just don't.
I would love to have their problems. Like, too many diamonds in my living room. Like, what are those problems? I don't know.
Sure, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I want their problems, to be honest with you.
No. I'm fine with the 0 diamonds I have.
Yeah. So after you were working in your internships and then you led towards a career in advertising, how did you find your way from advertising to doing comedy? And I know that, you know, you don't have to, a lot of people have day jobs and work in one thing and then do shows. Was that your path, or, you know, how did it go from advertising to comedy?
It was simultaneously happening for me because I was living in Hoboken, New Jersey, so commuting into New York. I could not just like not have a full-time job and like sustain a living and try to do comedy at the same time. So I always had a 9-to-5 throughout my comedy career. I basically like went from, you know, corporate job to corporate job. And in my first job, I started taking sketch classes at UCB. It's a mix of kids with trust funds whose parents pay their apartments and their like comedy careers. People like me with 9 to 5s and doing this at night and on weekends. And then people doing like the real hustle of, most of them actors, of taking like, it's like gig economy. So it's like they're either working in restaurants, the service industry, retail, nannying, babysitting, dog walking, like all types of like New York gigs, or I guess it's anywhere gigs, balancing that with comedy, and that allowed them the flexibility of auditioning during random hours during the day. I wasn't trying to be an actor, so I knew I was just like, I can do this on the weekends and at nights, and make it work for however long. So it was definitely a mix, but I did feel this weird pressure. I had friends who were nannying and or, you know, bartending or whatnot. And so because they weren't waking up at the same hours as me, I felt this like guilt and pressure from them when I would not stay out all hours of the night for shows and go to the bar after shows, like where all the teachers are. And it's like they're rubbing the elbows and probably inappropriate behavior and all that stuff. I don't regret not being able to do those things, but because I still did, like I still, you know, I would go, the Chris Gethard show, which is like a public access show, that had a cult following too. A lot of cults in the comedy world, but
only cults.
Only cults. They had like an 11 p.m. show. Oh my God. On the Upper East Side at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. And I lived in New Jersey, and I was like staying out and then I'd go to the bar after. It was just like unsustainable, but you're doing it because it's sort of like, it's high school. It's like you're socializing and making connections. And, you know, I didn't go to grad school, so UCB was my grad school, much to my mother's dismay. And she was like, I remember one time she was like, what the hell is this? Like, why don't you call Tina Poehler up for a job? And I'm like, yes, I will call Tina Poehler up for a job, to get on SNL. But, yeah, I remember there were some cocky people in my class who were like, why am I not on SNL already? And like in Improv 201. And I'm like, cause you're not funny. Like, I don't know, dude, you're not funny. But, I definitely was in the boat of like, I got to work my ass off and nothing is guaranteed. And I really like doing this, and this is giving me joy during like a very, you know, I was very depressed, during that time because of how like just one, regular clinical depression, and two, just not being happy in my day jobs. So comedy was really what fueled me and gave me joy during that time. The rockin' early 20s of me eating dollar pizza on street corners before comedy shows in New York. But yeah,
we all did it. It's all right. I also lived in New York City in my 20s. I'm older than you, but I was in New York City in the early 2000s in my 20s doing comedy in the Lower East Side. You know, It's for the people who are in the Northeast and trying to do theater or comedy or anything, you know, New York is kind of a rite of passage. You really got to go and try it out and see what's going on. I legitimately didn't know anything about UCB when I was there. I think it was like sort of just starting, and I was in a different crowd entirely. But you know, even just the idea of like paying your dues and being out and talking to the right people to get shows and that kind of stuff. There's always a little bit of that. How many years were you in the UCB community, and what kind of shows and stuff did you get involved in?
Yeah, so I started classes in 2011, like fall after I graduated. It was my first class. And I probably stopped. So I moved to Austin in 2016, probably stopped in 2015. I did the whole sketch program and the improv program and got into the advanced study, but didn't really take too many advanced classes. It was really competitive. I felt like there was a lot of favoritism, and it's not like, oh, Meghan, you just weren't funny enough. I just didn't feel like that was going to be where I got my opportunities. Like it felt one, it was not very diverse. Like I had a few friends who I talked to about this where like we would joke, there was like 3 Middle Eastern people taking classes at UCB. There was never like, during my time, there's maybe one Middle Eastern person on like a Herald, one of the house teams. I just didn't feel like there was a lot of representation while I was there. It took a while for them to even do things like having like their first all black house team. That was kind of at the tail end of me being involved at the theater. So there was just like not a lot of progression happening that I was seeing during that time. So sort of like this fake wokeism you're getting from the theater, like these are mostly liberal people, but they're not really practicing what they preach. And I did some like DCM is the 24-hour like weekend long marathon. I did that a couple of years in a row. I was never on like a house team. I was never in like a main stage show or anything like that. I was really in the indie scene. I through classes and meeting people, I formed teams, and I was on a bunch of different teams, and we'd do weekly and monthly shows, and I was just kind of like trying out things. And then in 2015, sort of at the end of me doing stuff at UCB, I decided to start a show with my good friend and improv teammate, Lisa Murray. And that's how That Time of the Month was born, which still exists today, longer than anything else in my comedy career. Because most shows, it's like last like maybe like 6 months in the comedy scene, especially bar shows. But that I just kind of knew that UCB was not going to hand me opportunities, and like you sort of they at times really had their favorites, and I was just never one of them. So I went and paved my own path and started my own shit basically with my friends, and that's where I felt like I really had ownership over my comedy voice and my stage time.
Where did you first put up That Time of the Month?
So the name of the theater, it's always a good sign when a theater name changes like 3 times over a span of like 6 months. But it started as the Treehouse because it was like upstairs. It was on like 32nd and 6th or something. No one cares. But it was called the Treehouse. It was owned by the People's Improv Theater. Then it got renamed and a couple times. I think the final name was the Pit Loft. And because it was literally like upstairs loft, not as stylish as Ann Taylor Loft, I would say, but getting close. But like they would put up shows. They had good shows, but it didn't feel like you were getting a lot of promotional support like some of the other, like I would say UCB, pushes to promote their rotating shows and their weekend shows. Pit Loft, it was, even though it was owned by the People's Improv Theater, it still felt pretty indie, which is still nice because then you didn't have like artistic directors kind of hammering down on your creative decisions. You had a lot of creative freedom, and that was sort of the compromise you took, not having like a lot of marketing and promotional support from the theater. So that's where my
that issue for sure, where it's like, if you get more help and you get more promotional support, then all of a sudden they're in there going like with like opinions on your show, and you're like, what? Mm-hmm. Why are you? No, this is my show. Yeah. Not asking how I should do it. I just wanted to see if you could print a poster or make a social media ad of any kind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be rough. Sometimes I find that sort of the indie scene of anything is kind of better. It's a little bit easier. I've always been the kind of gal who's kind of prefers the underground myself, If not everybody's doing it, that's kind of where I'm going to gravitate. That, to be honest, it's probably best that I didn't hear about UCB because I wouldn't have gone to it anyway, because I'd be like, what? A bunch of people like something? I hate it. Like, yeah. I'm just a child of the 90s to the point where it's like I'm so anti, like, the grunge scene is like deep in my soul where I'm like, what's that? It's cool? You mean uncool? Like, that's just, I can't even do it. But I've had better experiences in the indie world, like doing my own thing and creating it.
What's so funny you say that, because UCB started as like an act of rebellion against like theaters and institutions and all that, and they just like everything else, they got corporate, but then in a way that still wasn't running a business correctly. I guess that's pretty corporate. Like businesses being run poorly is very corporate, but so UCB started in the indie scene, I would say, but then because it just grew and grew and established these sort of standards and maybe bad habits of how they book and recruit and whatever. I don't know. It's just like,
you know what I think a lot of people do, and I say this because I've literally been in the rooms when people were making these kinds of decisions about like, what should we do? How do we make it more diverse? Is that like, I feel like realistically what happens is people have good intentions, but then they don't want to put in any of the effort. Like, especially people involved in, I used to book like classes and stuff for improv classes. And I can't tell you the number of people who would be like, so improv seems like more my speed because like, I don't like to learn lines. And I'm like, you still have to be in the thing. You still have to work hard on it. You still have to rehearse. What do we have to rehearse? Yeah. It's an improv show. And you're like, no. It's not about, rehearsing a play. But it's about rehearsing, and you have to be dedicated to it. So there's sort of a lackadaisical. Improv is a beautiful art, but there needs to be like a handful of like really intense business people that are like, I would love to run a theater that's likely to not make me any money. Can I do that, please? Like, and I think especially after reading all of the like articles and like paperwork that came out about like all the UCB meetings, like before they shut down in New York, but they were having like meetings about like firing a bunch of people and restructuring because they weren't making a lot of money. I don't think these kids wanted or even had any idea how many 20-somethings are like, you know what, we should run our own theater. It's going to be better. But the problem is the actual infrastructure of doing that and then being responsible for that in the long term is not as fun. It just doesn't. Yeah. So people just don't do it. That's the hard part. I'm very cynical about these kinds of things, though, is I'm like, people don't want to do the hard work, so they won't. And then it won't be there. So, I don't know. I feel like the beauty of indie shows and the beauty of the whole independent like crowd is that that's who's doing the work. That's who cares. That's who's going to stay up all night long to create something, to make something come together. And nobody made a poster for them, but it doesn't matter because they're going to tell everyone that they see on the subway, you should come to my show. Hey, you should come to my show. Like just all the things where it's like, I don't know, like there really is something special about the people who will do it on their own versus the people who go to a larger sort of organization and expect that organization to do it for them, because usually it's like UCB, especially in the New York scenario, is run by people who like want to have the fun but don't want to deal with the hard work. And then when the hard work happens, they're like, you know what, guys, we'll just close. Like, and that's better. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, is that better for the 500 people that are involved in your community currently?
Yeah, like, and who are trying to keep it alive. Like all of the people, there's like so many staff members that were working hard and voicing their opinions about the problems at the theater, and it's just the management, like it's the higher ups. It's
they didn't want to do it. They just were like trying to piece out as much as they could, and now they kind of got to. The world kind of let it go. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't read tone when you're reading like a transcript of somebody having a conversation, of course, but if they really wanted things to go better than 6 months ago when there was trouble, maybe they could have made it better. But again, I'm not the one running it, and I've been in the place of running it and definitely allowed things to run badly. So, sometimes it's hard to be the person in charge.
Yeah.
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 Pivoting conversationally. You were having success, though, in New York with your friend Lisa, making that time of the month. What led you to decide to move? And did Lisa also move to Austin?
No, she did not. So this is where I get really corny and say that I moved for lifestyle reasons. But basically, I was in New York, all like right after college. My family's from New Jersey. I'd never left the Northeast. I really wanted to experience another city while I can before I was really settled down. I thought I'd go to grad school at some point, maybe for film, but also I was like, oh, no, don't have money. So my boyfriend also was in the same boat in terms of wanting to move to another city, had been in New York for a long time. He definitely pushed me more than I would have taken the initiative. But I, at the end of the day, I really did want to move. I just didn't know like how. Austin felt like a good city because it had a growing comedy scene and it had a balance between like urban and a town, like city and town, and New York. I mean, you've lived there, but for people who haven't lived there, it's like the grind really wears you down. Like, you know, hating your job, hating your commute, not making a lot of money, and all that money going to rent, being broke all the time. Just
oh, yeah. New York's a killer.
It wears you down.
Snow? Plus snow?
Plus snow.
Get
Plus
out
snow.
of here. Get out of here. Be difficult but warm. That's what I'm looking for. Get out of here.
Yeah, I want to be depressed, but it be sunny outside. Like,
Please.
Let me have some balances.
Exactly. I want to feel like the outside is not reflective of my inside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's funny.
So
I actually am from Boston originally, so when you said you went to BU, I was like, oh wow, you chose to go to Boston. I got out as quickly as I possibly could. But yeah, I mean, just the idea of moving away from such a cold and harsh place to go to somewhere that seems more freeing. And also, I say this to lots of people, and you'll understand because you've had the experience, but I like to say that warts and all, Austin is still a magical wonderland. I mean, it's ridiculous how nice it is. Like, even though there are plenty of ways. Don't send me an email, people, about how it turns out it actually is terrible. Yeah, I gotcha. I hear you. I understand. Yeah. But I've lived in the other worse places. Yeah. And I'm here to tell you that it is way better. Yes. No one's perfect at all. Not one of these 50 states. Not so much. But no, I have enjoyed and had the experience to not only do things that I've wanted to do, but to have seen things in this town artistically that I never thought were possible. And I've been like, yes, this place is doing it. We are making this happen. So when you moved to town, what'd you do? How'd you sink in? Did you and your boyfriend like pick a theater and start hanging out there? Or did you like stay away from comedy at first and try to be, because you seem very professional. You seem very like, you got a business degree, right? So like you take care of business first and then you have the fun, which I appreciate. That'll keep you afloat in life. But like, you know, what happened when you first moved to town? How did you get involved?
Yeah, so I business first. I think I call myself the type A comedian, which
totally
I like because I'm like a producer. I'm a producer, so I have my producer hat on. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, I need to also remind people I'm a creative and have them like want to book me for those things. But I moved down with my I was working for Vice's TV channel, another company that I worked for, which like rebranded or went away because now Viceland doesn't exist. It's like Vice TV, but TV Without Pity doesn't exist. Like most companies I worked for, websites I wrote for, like shuttered after I touched them. I have like the opposite of King Midas touch in every job I take. I know
you doing it at all. There is a shelf life to any kind of creative endeavor. You know, don't worry. True. Don't take it upon yourself. You're lovely.
It's all me. But yeah, so I had that for a little bit. Then I didn't. So I was on the job hunt for a month. Luckily, I landed at an ad agency in terms of comedy. So I knew I was like, I can't afford any more classes. I went into credit card debt essentially from UCB classes. They're expensive and the prices are raising. So I knew that was sort of a part of the path. I'd also taken a sitcom and screenplay writing class with my friend Scott Reynolds, who's an amazing writer and friend and like guiding light in that industry. So I felt like I had taken all the classes I needed to take and I needed to just do the thing. So I came down here to like write and also adapt that time of the month down here. Lisa stayed in New York. She's like a real person. She has a real career. She's a music therapist. She's like changing lives. She works at a retirement community. So she's like a real person while I was like trying to be a pretend person. And then I had Cold Town was one of the first theaters I knew about. Chrissy Shackelford, who was in my character 101 class and now is like killing it in former UCB and all those scenes up in New York. We basically swapped. Like she went up to New York shortly before I came down here, so like I knew she came from Cold Town. Yeah. I knew a couple names. Like like there's a few people. Sarah Spear. I got connected to so AJ McKean. I don't know why I'm like name dropping. I guess that like I don't know why not name drop, but basically
whoever helped you along the way, why not chat about them, right? Hey.
Yeah.
These are good peeps. If you're moving to Austin, these are good peeps. Talk to them. Ask them for help. Yeah. It's
true. I did have one friend who was doing stuff when it was the New Movement. So that's wrong. I did know two theaters. There was Cold Town and the New Movement.
Oh, wow.
But I lived closer north, so I picked Cold Town. And I messaged AJ. AJ was good friends with one of my friends, Patrick, from who I met through the Chris Gethard show in New York. I told AJ, hey, I've been running the show in New York, and I did all the UCB training. I want to put it up somewhere. And then he connected me to the artistic director at Cold Town, Will Cleveland. So I got lucky in the fact that I didn't have to what most people have to do is start in classes and meet people that way. And that's what I did in New York. But I just was like, I cannot afford to do that again. I didn't have an interest in continuing with improv. I love doing improv when there's no pressure associated with it. I was like, starting to get depressed about it when it was so competitive in New York. Now when people ask me to do improv, which is it not super frequently, but like delightfully randomly, I enjoy it so much more because there's no strings attached to it. Like I'm not disappointing teammates. I'm just like a guest, to their wonderful team. So I didn't have to go through the whole like 101, 201, all that stuff again. I was able to just like use those connections from people that were in the UCB scene and who knew that like, okay, I had a show that had a good run in New York and wanted to adapt it here. And so they gave me a spot. It was a late spot. Even though we're a late night show, we were doing it at like 7:30ish, like normal, like after work hours before people could like take the subway all the way home in New York. But here in Austin, I was put in like the 11:30, I think Friday night slot. And then I eventually moved up to Saturday 11 at Cold Town in like year 2, I think. So that was tough too.
Still pretty great spots for walking in and getting a show Friday or Saturday night. I know 11:30 doesn't sound great, but I'm pretty sure I did a show for like 5 years before I got Friday or Saturday. So I was like, really? That's impressive.
Yeah. Weekends where it's at for sure. It was nice. Even though the time was a challenge, but eventually like we found our footing and we grew an audience, and even in that 11 p.m. slot, we gradually would start to sell out a little bit at the tail end of Cold Town. And then I moved it to Fallout last year. So I have not done the classes route while I've been in Austin, but in the time that I've been here, I've been on shows. I've like kept track of people's names. I feel like Mitt Romney when I say this. I have like binders full of women, but I have a long like Google Doc list of performers, female identifying and now non-binary identifying performers in Austin, because I looked at myself as more of a host and a booker and producer now than just like a performer. And I want to keep track of people like new names coming up and people who are like, just get like who should be headlining for my show that are just starting out but like have gotten their feet wet and are getting big shows, getting booked on big shows. And I keep track of, like, whenever I do shows, I keep track of, like, the women and non-binary performers who are on that lineup that I haven't met before. I really try to do my due diligence in making sure that I'm getting a nice mix of people from all over the community, because I felt like in New York, a lot of times you see shows where people are just putting their friends on the stage, whether they deserve that stage time or not. And sometimes it's great because you see that they're like a chemistry and they gel and it's fun. You're watching their inside jokes. And sometimes you're like, why can't, like, give stage time to other people, even if you're not friends with them, if they deserve it and if they're putting in their time. So I basically like moved around the scene, just booking and producing this show and some other shows along the way. That is how I met people in the Austin community, improv, sketch, music, and stand-up.
That's pretty great. I really love that. I really also agree that, you know, a lot of times, you know, people won't get the recognition they deserve or get the boost that they're looking for. And I'm of a mind that, you know, we all have different, like, opinions on who's good and not. Mm-hmm. So that's why there need to be more people who are, you know, checking people out and watching shows and then giving opportunities to people. And, like, for me, I love teaching, and I love helping other people move forward and do other projects. Like, I'm not trying to be famous or trying to, like, get you to say, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, the first person that gets an Oscar and thanks me, I'll be okay with it. But, you know, I do like the idea that, you know, different people, especially that I haven't met, I try to watch shows. I'll, like, go to other people's sketch shows and, like, see who's, like, cool and fun that I would want to work with and pull them in. And I think that that's really important. I mean, take a chance on new people. A lot of times they're like, well, I haven't seen them do too much, so I'm not going to. It's like, take a chance, man. The people that are working, you know, who you see on stage all the time, they're busy. Yeah. They don't have time to be in your show. So you know who you got to ask? The, like, smaller level people. The, like, people who are acting in, like, a sketch class recital. Those are your loves. That's who you're looking for. Like, that's the crowd that's giving of themselves for someone else. That's the crowd who's making a scene that's probably not very funny seem very funny. Yeah. Right? So that's the kind of crowd that you're looking for. That's really great. I love the revamp of Binders Full of Women. It sounds so nice now.
Yeah. I'm taking all these problematic things like Mitt Romney and Lorne Michaels and putting, like, a progressive spin on them.
Absolutely.
Like, they can be used for good.
So now that you're in a different sort of world, and you don't have to have an answer to this. This is just sort of something I was thinking of. Since you have the names and stuff of people that you're interested in working with and giving opportunities to, are you still trying to find a new show to produce and a new way to create stuff, even though right now we're not doing live theater as much?
Yeah, so I knew as soon as quarantine happened, my 5-year anniversary of that time of the month was literally on the weekend that quarantine was really like the hammer was coming down. So wow. I did my show on a Saturday, it was like March 15th, I think, and the next day Fallout's like, we're closing the theater, and I was like, ooh, I just made it in under the wire. Not that I was, like, trying to push anyone to do anything they were uncomfortable with, but that was sort of the deciding show. I told the theater, I'm like, I will take your lead. Like, if you think it's safe to do the show, I will do the show. They ended up cutting the audience and capping at 50 for safety and to have some distance in between people. I told my crew they didn't have to come. We have a video crew each month to film the show and put it online and make social clips. So it was a crewless show. It was like we did fill the theater based on the limit, which was nice, especially for our 5-year show. But I also was like, this is the changing point right here. Like, I knew that was going to probably be the last time I was on stage for a while. I just was trying to bring also, like, this is corny, but I did want to bring a little bit of joy and relief to people during the beginning of a tense time. Yeah. And I heard that from people. Like, people were like, I needed to get out before I knew I was going to be like locked up. It's not as bad as people like. It's not as bad for the people quarantined that are privileged enough to quarantine. So I shouldn't say locked up, but before they knew that they weren't going to be able to do stuff like this. So I was ready to do the live stream version for the next month. And we did the Earth Day show, and it like conveniently was very green. I already had that lineup booked. I think I like confirmed with everyone that they were cool with that. And I just sort of continued knowing that I'm going to just keep booking the show every month and just ask everyone if they're okay doing the live stream. And the first month was really great. Both months were really great. This last month, we had some tech issues for our Mother's Day show last weekend. So now I'm sort of trying to think about, is there an easier way for us to bring the show to people that doesn't require so many tech layers to it and can be a little bit less stressful for me, because I put in a lot of work writing and producing and promoting the show each month, even with the live stream version. So for something to go wrong due to like live stream connections and Wi-Fi and like out of our control, out of everyone's control, it makes me a little nervous to keep doing it that way. So I'm looking to change it up for next month. I might like see if like Instagram Live makes sense. We were doing it through Fallout Theater's Zoom and Facebook, and then it goes to Facebook Live. It goes from Zoom for the performers. It goes to Twitch and then Facebook Live. No one cares about these details, but insider info. If you're doing a live stream show,
if you're figuring it out, that's valid information for how to lock it through. Who knows?
Yeah, and it's been a little weird, talking to my dog basically as the audience, like when I'm performing. Sure. But we're getting people watching and saying like that they look forward to it each month, which is really nice to hear. It's super validating, because I think a lot of performers feel a little bit forgotten right now. It's really hard to stay relevant. Now everyone's online and going live. Like it's like the playing field is both even and even more challenging than ever, because anyone can go online and do live stream. But now my show might be competing with like the brilliance of John Early and Kate Berlant going live at the same time, like big name people. So it's hard, because now anyone could watch from anywhere. That's such a
deep cut comedy reference, by the way. I like your like big names like Kate Berlant and John Early, and I was like, me and 7 other people know who they are, and I love them, but
they're big to me. They're big to us.
That was a pretty deep cut. I was like, oh, bless you. I love them both, but again, hilarious. Oh God, yeah. It's nice that you're there to give people some joy, and I'm glad that you've gotten some good response.
Yeah. Well, so I am still trying to figure out like how do we keep doing this in a way, because it feels like it'll be like this for a while, especially because people are like going to the beach and getting their goddamn haircuts. So I think the longer people keep screwing up, I think the longer fallout will have to stay closed in theaters like that, unfortunately. So I am trying to pivot to another project as well that'll be a little bit more low maintenance for me. I'd only have to book like one guest each week. And we talked about this earlier. I'm not sure if that was part of the official interview, but
no, it wasn't. Tell me about it.
Okay. So, cause it'll be announced by the time this airs. So, we'll hopefully be like a week or two into our episodes. And I came up with a silly idea while I was, on Instagram. I asked my few followers, I said, hey, like, should I do a baking/cooking show about me being like a very mediocre person in the kitchen called No One Asked for This? Because really no one would ask for that. Like, I have no talent to bring or no interesting expertise in the kitchen. I just started baking and cooking more because of quarantine. And everyone said yes. And I'm like, well, that's silly. They're being nice. And then when I finally did go live baking something, I realized I was naturally like trying to fill the space of the silence of me just talking to my camera. And I was talking about issues that I'm stressing about, like how are we going to vote in the runoff elections? And it's so important that we vote because district maps are being decided next year in 2021. So the people who are in office are going to decide if our maps look hella gerrymandered or not. So from that, I came up with the idea to have this be an interview series, because also it's just weird when it's just me talking to a camera. So I really wanted to have a conversation with someone. And on that time of the month, we already have, along with the comedy lineup, we have a strong female leader guest. So it's an activist or entrepreneur or subject matter expert kicking ass in their community. So I sort of, along with my Romney binders full of women of comedy performers, I have the same version of like activists and organization and community leaders. So these are people who are like experts on, healthcare in Texas, or experts on voter fraud and topics that hopefully people are interested in hearing about, because it affects us directly and it will affect us in this next election. So No One Asked for This will now become this weekly series where I sit down with an expert, a woman or non-binary person in the community, and they'll have a topic where that highlights the social injustices happening in our world, or on a local or national level. And in a way, that's something no one asked for. No one asked for these injustices. Like, there's so many that we can name off, basically, like all the headlines lately. And at the same time, I would be doing a mediocre task that no one asked to watch either. So repotting a plant, or baking, or, putting together patio furniture and like silly stuff, not meant to distract, but just be sort of like a stress reliever for me as I talk through these maybe heavy issues with my guest. And hopefully I put a little comedic spin on it, because at the end of the day, people don't want to be more depressed. But hopefully they learn something from it. If not, they just learn like, wow, I'm not going to click on Megan's Instagram Live accidentally next week. Like,
no, they'll love it. They'll be like, this girl's talking about something really important, and Megan's really upset about that IKEA bookcase.
the rules, those bookshelves don't make sense. The rules of those bookshelves. IKEA.
The whole experience of IKEA furniture doesn't make sense to me.
I think we just came across something. IKEA furniture basically equals gerrymandered district maps. Like, none of it makes sense.
You're like, this thing does not turn that screw. Yeah. How is this supposed to work? What are you talking about? Yeah, these things are connected. I'm telling you, the conspiracy runs deep.
That's true.
So one final question I want to ask for you, and thank you so much for chatting with me and sharing your stories. What is a piece of advice that you have for, women or other comedians who are trying to make it, but are, like you, trying to be doing the right thing and having a job and taking care of yourself and, like I said, business first. How do you business first, but also do, comedy, and also producing shows, and also you seem to be trying to help the world and help women and help people. That's a lot of work, right? But you also have, like a day job career situation. How do you navigate those things and balance?
Yeah, I love when you say business first, because now I feel like I'm the comedy version, or more comedic version, of a mullet. It's like business in the front, comedy in the back, and like, how do I balance this haircut? So I think it's tough. I think it's really hard to predict right now, especially with the job market. Like, if you're in the position I've been in, where you're trying to find the next step and how you're going to not only make money and pay the bills, but also continue pursuing a career in comedy and entertainment, whatever that might be, as a performer or writer or director or whatever it is. It's funny, I actually wrote a college student found me on LinkedIn who's doesn't have any connection to the industry and is trying to figure out, like, what do I do, especially during a pandemic. So I wrote a couple tips down today, and I feel like even though this is advice I was giving a probably 20-year-old in Boston right now, I felt like it was advice I needed to give an almost 31-year-old me, because I am in this position, like many others, where we don't know if our careers are going to stall completely during this time. We don't know when productions and projects are going to pick up again. So you can, your number one, I would say your number one priority should just be survival right now, and finding a way to make an income and making sure you're taken care of and paying the bills. and saving and paying off your debt and making sure, like you said earlier, like that you're prepared for this because it might happen again. After that, the tips that I gave this kid in terms of just, comedic pursuits is basically like creating stuff while you can, if you have the capacity to. Writing, like if you want to be a writer, you have to write. I need to take this advice, like write every day. I'm trying to like switch up between humor essays and scripts and different projects, like whatever your medium is, just use this time to write if you can, if you have the mental capacity to do so. Building your online network. These are multi-steps, but basically reaching out, like how he reached out to me. I reached out to someone who has a career that I want to have one day. And I had a great chat with her about how she got there. And it was so helpful because I'd never had that conversation in like the decade that I have been trying to make that career happen for myself. Establishing your comedic voice online. So this is sort of connecting to writing. It's like, if you want to put up like a character monologue, you can do it. Like as long as you have like a social media account and Wi-Fi and a phone. And I know those are also privileged things to have, but if you have the means to be creating content on your own, even if it's really lo-fi, everyone's sort of expecting it to be lo-fi right now. Put your work out there while everyone's at home on their phones and laptops and tablets. And then I would say the most important step, which also goes back to like survival being number one right now, is taking creative breaks and consuming work that inspires you. So I've been like a bad comedy nerd over the past few years because I've been so busy that I haven't really been catching up on all these shows that people are saying, like, if you want to be a great dark comedy writer, watch this show and stuff like that. And that also sounds like so privileged to say. It's like, I'm not watching enough TV, but now is the time. Now is the time to get caught up on these shows and see what's out there and see what's being picked up and by what was being picked up by the networks and what they're looking for and what kind of stories they're telling and pick a genre that you want to write and then watch those shows and learn to write them and look up the scripts but it's like all these things you can do from home right now. The fate of the world is very questionable, as is the entertainment industry all the time. This has just added another like layer of like, what the fuck? Like, who knows what's going to happen for any of us coming out of this. But yeah, it's like you just take it day by day, do as much as you can, but don't feel this pressure. Like when I put in the note, like about taking creative breaks, I said, don't feel pressure to be productive. Like, I know there's so many like cute graphics going around about that. There's like graphics that are saying like, you have to be as creative as possible. Like, now's your time to launch all of your series. Like, no, that's silly. Like, don't do what I'm doing. Like, I am taking breaks though. Like I am, I haven't ever had this time before to think about these things. And that's why I'm trying to, for those who also have stress about the world and the news, like use that stress, put that stress into these creative projects. Like I've been catching the like full frontal clips that Samantha Bee's posting from home, and these are heavy issues she's covering, but it's still like her voice. So it's like letting me know what's going on, and like, oh my God, like all of a sudden we have to fight for the U.S. Postal Service to stay open. But this is a way for them to do their job and bring us content and also educate an audience. And so maybe if your goal is to educate an audience, use that anger with what's going on in our administration's mishandling of this to fuel your creative projects and maybe connect it to like a cause. If that is something you want to do. Like I'm producing a fundraiser this Friday, a live stream fundraiser, and I feel so helpless. I'm not a healthcare worker. I'm not on the front line. There's only so much I can give, like monetarily, but using my skills as a producer and booker and marketing and promotion of stuff, like I can help raise money for a cause, and that's one small thing, even if it's not all of the things at once.
Yeah, don't feel the pressure. You're giving advice saying, like, don't feel the pressure, but I can hear the pressure in your shoulders. Don't worry. You're all right. You're doing tons of stuff for the world crumbling around you. Don't worry. You're all right.
I gotta heed my therapist's advice for once. But it's true. Like, I love, it's so funny whenever I get the question, like, what advice do you have? And I'm like, I feel like I need to write this down for myself and remind me every day, because I forget. Like, you get so busy and overwhelmed. Like, some advice I also usually say is, like, learn how to say no to things. And that was also in the pre-corona world, when you would, like, be booked on shows, overbooking yourself on stuff and projects. But it's still true today. Like, say no to the Zoom conference you don't really want to go to. Like, if you don't have the bandwidth or the mental capacity that day, just take time for yourself. We're going through trauma. Like, it's like worldwide trauma right now. So, like I said, survival is key.
Survival is key. Well, thank you, Meghan, for being on the podcast and sharing your stories with me. Thank you so much for chatting with me, and I'm really excited to share your journey with my audience.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for also sharing. I didn't know your background in New York, and it's always awesome to hear about how, like, a fellow performer also, like, came into, like, New York and Austin and taking that journey. And I appreciate you letting me ramble at you for the past however long we've talked. And
No, ramble. You're lovely. You're lovely.
Oh,
we had a great time.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And hopefully you stay well and healthy, and everyone listening stays alive as long as they can. As long as we can all stay alive.
Stay alive, everybody. That's the hope. Survival's number one.
Yes. Not the show Survivor. I would not put that show on a pedestal. I've never watched it. But Survival. Do not mix those two up. Someone's going to be, like, binge watching Survivor and going to be like, why isn't my TV career taking off?
I don't understand. Thanks for listening to Yes But Why Podcast. Check out all our episodes on yesbutwhypodcast.com, or check out all the content on our network, HC Universal, at hcuniversalnetwork.com.